Paradise, I wanted to ask you also with X Clan. One of my favorite songs of your guys was the Day of Outrage Operation Snatchback, and that deals with Yusef Hawkins' murder and different things that are
Yep.
very political. How and what are you guys bringing beyond the flyers, beyond this celebratory angle, but this educational, political angle to the Hip Hop Museum?
Well, what is hip hop without the fifth element? You know, we say that the fifth element is knowledge, including wisdom and understanding. But actually, I would argue that knowledge was the first element, because we had to create it. We had the knowledge of what we were doing. It was coming from our genetic memory. The turntable comes from the djembe. The rapper comes from the African griot. The elements of hip hop pre-existed what we now call hip hop by hundreds, maybe even thousands of years in some cases, including graffiti. The Egyptians and the Inca wrote on walls. So did the Native Americans and Africans, and even cavemen wrote on walls. So we can't just say 1973 for the elements of hip hop. The elements of hip hop predate everything we know. And the ancient African proverb said, if you could walk, you could dance. If you could speak, you could sing. And hip hop is participatory. We're not just meant to watch hip hop from a distance and be casual fans of it. It's not just a genre or a song or rap music. It's a full-fledged culture that includes fashion and beatboxing and DJing and many other things that we don't even consider elements of hip hop, like knowledge and like the way we walk, the way we identify with each other, the slang that we speak. It's all hip hop culture.
Yes. And Pete Nice, to that very point, Paradise was making too, a lot of your lyrics in particular, more so than Searches and Third Base, but then even on your solo material, were much more coded, or you had to understand what you were speaking about. It wasn't just direct. So how do you deliver that esotericness, that code, those different things into a museum and make it so that someone that doesn't know a lot of this stuff or these references, so they can fully appreciate and understand it looking at it now?
Right. Well, that would be a bit of a challenge to get into someone's mind like that. But I mean, there's so many different artists and MCs who, I mean, look at Cool Keith, like spraying disinfectants, all the different imagery that you have. So I think that we have some programs that we're working on with Microsoft. This one thing called Flow Scholar, which is kind of like an AI like rhyming tool, like not with music, but just straight up like writing rhymes and generating things, teaching someone how to actually write rhymes, like more of like an exercise in learning how to do it. And I think some of those can be some of those technologies can be, fine tuned to what you're saying, that whereas you can understand, what was behind some of these lyrics, and the, like you said, the double entendres, and the, all the different subliminals that go into
And
lyrics, and
nuances.
right, and there's so many different MCs who have had that throughout time.
Yeah, because to your point, Cool Keith and MC Shin, a lot of people back in that early mid 80s were rapping about outer space and different,
Right.
reaching the cosmos and different things. And obviously, Brother J was into a
Mm-hmm.
lot of esotericness as well. So,
Yep.
Right.
uh, that being said, too, with the other elements of hip hop, how are you guys bringing all the elements, would you say, into it? We haven't talked much about the DJs, but what DJ stuff is being represented and presented in particular?
Well, I'll give that
Well,
alley to Pete Nice.
so
Go
like
ahead, Pete.
in terms of like the story of DJs, we've gone very deep into the research and to the actual foundational disco DJs developing into the hip hop DJs, and luckily we did have a great donation to the museum from the family of Pete DJ Jones, And we literally got like the majority of his entire collection from his turntables, his entire record collection, all the other equipment, fog machines. Like it's crazy. So we are able to, visually tell that story through those artifacts, and we can also tie them into, we have one of the Zulu speakers from 1976-77 that was at Bronx River. The Disco Twins from Queens have their system, which they're going to be either donating or loaning. The Infinity Machine from Queens also has their system as well. So, I mean, it's just showing the sound system culture that, from guys like King Charles in Queens to Flowers and my boy and the guys in Brooklyn,
Yep.
two
And
Cool
then we got
Hertel
Breakout
brothers.
and Barron.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
Breakout
got
Baron
Breakout
up
and
in the
Barron,
Bronx.
my boy Bob.
So what we're trying
I'm
to do
sorry.
is to kind of recreate the sounds of each of these boroughs at the time, and
Yep.
some of that comes from some of the surviving tapes. And we do have one concept, whereas we could recreate a jam from like 1976 or 77, maybe with Disco King Mario, or like Jazzy J when he was with Mario, through Microsoft and their technology, which is interesting. But telling the story of the DJs is very, very important, and we do have the bass line and the artifacts to help do that, as well as like the sounds, that have been recorded and documented throughout the years.
Okay. And then also, as you're both well aware, since you did a lot of touring, even though the emphasis and the focus justifiably is on New York, obviously Los Angeles, Houston, Miami, D.C., a lot of different cities had their own emerging, burgeoning hip hop scenes of their own. So even from prior to 1990. So how are you guys, and what are you doing specifically to highlight some of these other cities and these other movements?
Well, every city we
Well,
go to, we have artifacts from that city in the collection already. You know, me and Pete, once again, we're collectors ourselves. We didn't just fall off the back of the newspaper truck this morning. We're fans of hip hop. And when I say that, we don't really discriminate about north, south, east, west coast. There is no west coast hip hop, no southern hip hop. There's only hip hop as far as we're concerned. And the one thing about it, like when you if you take a picture and there's 1,000 people in that photo, when you see a copy of that photo, the first thing you're going to look for when you see that photo, you're going to try to find yourself. Because as a human being, it's important to see yourself and identify with yourself. So it's very important to us when telling the stories of hip hop to remember that it is indigenous Black culture, and we have sampled worldwide culture to get to where we are today. Even though it was filtered through the filter of the South Bronx, we were highly aware of what was going on in the community all over the world. And when hip hop spread, it was spread by young people going to college from New York, by young people going to the military, by people visiting their families all over the world and taking the tapes, taking the flyers, taking the culture with them and growing them organically in many different places, not limited to Europe and Asia, but all over the world. Hip hop has traveled since its very inception.
That's for sure. Okay. And then with the educational element, Pete, how do you guys balance, as I guess KRS-One famously would say, the edutainment angle of it all, to make it so it's not relegated to, oh, this is old and this is history, but to also make it entertaining at the same time? How have you guys found you've been able to navigate it and walk that line?
I think, well, like as Dice was just saying, with telling these stories, you need to connect the past with the present, and in some cases that's very tough to do, because if you look at a disconnect between the young people who are practitioners of hip hop right now, they might not know who Kool Herc is, and they might not know the full history. But to a certain point, a lot of people from our age didn't know the history as well, and that didn't affect their creation of, rhymes and artwork. So as far as all the socioeconomic factors and the changes in the country, like I think a lot of those backstories on what was happening going through the crack era, going through the whole '90s, the East West, controversies, all those things that are the backdrop of hip hop, to tell those stories and frame them, in the right, timeline to show how things progress. I think that's important, and I think that will help people understand more about how hip hop developed. But also going back to what he said before and what you asked about, how are you gonna represent like Houston and Miami, all these different like hip hop was regional, and like even when you look at like when the Fresh Fest went out in 1984, how important that was in exposing hip hop to different elements, even with the dance at that time. Like things really grew from that. So it's kind of like the Johnny Appleseed going around, the whole country and planting these seeds that just took off. And I think that, that's like the most important foundational moment in hip hop, when things grew all around the country. And you had all these stories of, artists and groups. Like we had DJ Ready Red's sister, Ada, reached out through Van Silk and said that she still had his original fedora cap from the cover of Making Trouble album. And like when you look at like putting artifacts together with stories, like rest in peace, he's passed on, but like he still lives through this artifact of his hat, of the, his original records that he still had. So we're able to honor him and also tell the
Yep.
story of like the earliest days of Houston hip hop. So like it's very important for us to document all these different regions and what happened exactly. Look at your book on gangster rap. There's so many different levels. Like when you took it with talking about Schoolie D, Schoolie D performed at the Latin Quarter. That's why he said he was king in New York at that time, because he actually was at the LQ with Paradise and got on the bill. So there's just lots of rich history, and like thank God that we're able to actually be a part of this and be able to document this and bring it forth for the youth, because up to this point, without having a museum of hip hop, I don't think that we've done a great job of presenting how we got here, and all of the blood, sweat, and tears of all those who came before all these MCs today and all these artists today.
And when the museum opens, is it going to be up till 2025? Is it going to be all the way current, or is there a specific cutoff of the stuff?
I mean, I think it's going to be current, but of course it'll be much more difficult to encompass everything current up to date, to tell the history of 2024 and 25.
Right.
But I think you'll be able to access all of the elements that make up the music, and that's definitely going to be a challenge, because like we just said, there's so many different artists, and like there's probably more artists who might get shot in the last 2 years than there were in the entire year of 1985 or 86 that came out on record. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's been a wild and remarkable evolution. So, for both of you, Paradise, Pete Nice, anything else you wanted to add before we go?
I just wanted to say that, in the midst of all of this, it's so important for us as we build this museum to understand that it's a living, breathing museum. It's not a mausoleum. It's not a place where hip hop goes to die and be memorialized. It's a place where hip hop goes to live, be remembered, a place that should inspire current artists and future artists, and also create bridges and paths to new creativity, continued use of technology to keep growing and changing the genre, and also understanding that hip hop is not just what we put on the walls. Hip hop is us.
There it is. Pete Nice, anything before we go?
Yeah, well, that was a good one by Dice. But I think in addition to that, just as we're getting out on the road on this tour and interacting with the public, I think we're able to be approached by all those people who might have these stories, who might have these artifacts, and without them reaching out to us, we might not never know that they exist or that they could be utilized, to memorialize this history. So we're very, happy to have this platform, and with our TV show and all these other things that we've involved with, to actually give people, a lane and a venue to actually come and say, listen, this is the story of my brother or, my uncle. And, also have had some of the, you know, siblings of some of the early promoters in New York City who like have the flyers, have some of the paperwork to really, document the full history of hip hop. So it's like I said, it's for hip hop. It's hip hop is us, and like we're wide open to bringing everybody into this project and telling their story.
Well, there it is. Well, Paradise, Pete Nice, thank you so much for coming through to Unique Access. And thank you for doing this. And thank you for the museum.
No, thank
All
you
right.
very
Thank
much. We
you for everything
appreciate
you
you.
do.